President Claudia Sheinbaum said her government.
A full-scale trade war is exploding, and the $1.5 trillion US auto industry is on the verge of collapse. Mexico has struck back with $3 billion in retaliatory tariffs, shaking an industry that depends on 40% of its parts from across the border. Ford, GM, and Stellantis are feeling the heat as steel and aluminum prices skyrocket, forcing them to rethink production while new car prices could jump by 10%, hitting consumers hard. The Center for Automotive Research warns that hundreds of thousands of jobs are on the line, with factories in Michigan, Ohio, and Kentucky facing possible shutdowns. With the USMCA trade deal in crisis and Mexico's grip on North American auto manufacturing tightening, will US automakers weather this storm, or are we witnessing a massive industry shift? Subscribe now for exclusive insights on this unfolding crisis. The US auto industry is on the brink of a major crisis as trade tensions with Mexico escalate, threatening jobs, production, and supply chains. Mexico, the largest supplier of auto parts to the US, accounts for nearly 40% of all imported components, making it a critical player in the industry. However, recent trade disputes have triggered a response that could cripple American automakers. In response to US policies, Mexico has increased tariffs on key auto parts, driving up manufacturing costs for American companies. With raw materials like steel and aluminum already 25% more expensive due to earlier US tariffs, automakers are now facing an even steeper rise in expenses. The Center for Automotive Research estimates that these economic pressures could lead to 366,000 job losses across the sector. Mexico is also limiting exports of critical components, forcing US automakers to either seek alternative sources or slow down production. Ford, GM, and Stellantis have already signaled potential production cuts, leading to possible factory shutdowns in states like Michigan, Ohio, and Kentucky, regions heavily reliant on auto manufacturing. Meanwhile, other countries like China and Canada have responded by imposing their own tariffs on US-made vehicles, making it harder for American automakers to compete globally. The National Association of Manufacturers warns that new car prices could increase by up to 10%, further reducing consumer demand. With economic uncertainty growing, policymakers must act fast to renegotiate trade agreements before the damage becomes irreversible. If not, the long-term stability of the US auto sector could be at serious risk. The US auto parts imported from Mexico. Escalating trade tensions are severely disrupting the $1.5 trillion auto industry. Tariffs on steel and aluminum, combined with export restrictions, have sharply increased manufacturing costs, creating financial strain on General Motors, Ford, and Stellantis, especially in Michigan, Ohio, and Kentucky, where key production facilities are struggling to manage rising expenses. The National Automobile Dealers Association warns that higher material costs could push new car prices up by $1,500 to $3,000, making vehicles less affordable for consumers. With shrinking profit margins, automakers are being forced to reconsider production levels, increasing the risk of job losses and factory slowdowns. Mexico's strategic position as a primary supplier of raw materials and auto components means prolonged trade disputes pose a severe risk to North American manufacturing. The surge in steel and aluminum prices is pressuring companies to cut costs, further impacting employment and vehicle pricing. As uncertainty looms, policymakers face growing pressure to resolve these trade tensions before they inflict lasting economic damage. Without swift action, the US auto industry could face an unprecedented crisis with long-term consequences. The US auto industry is facing a severe crisis as trade disputes drive up production costs, disrupt supply chains, and threaten thousands of jobs. The Center for Automotive Research warns that these financial strains could result in massive job losses across the industry, compelling manufacturers to reduce costs and, in some cases, close facilities or shift production to regions with lower trade barriers. Labor unions warn that assembly line workers in key manufacturing states like Michigan, Ohio, and Kentucky are at high risk of unemployment, deepening economic instability in regions dependent on auto production. At the same time, consumers are feeling the impact of rising steel and aluminum prices, which have increased vehicle costs. The National Association of Manufacturers projects that new car prices could rise by up to 10%. Making affordability a major concern. As financing options tighten, many buyers postpone purchases, causing declining sales. This strains automakers already struggling with shifting market demands. If trade policies stay uncertain, manufacturers may cut jobs and slow production. With the industry at a critical turning point, Policymakers face pressure to renegotiate agreements before economic damage worsens. Without immediate action, the US auto industry's future could be in serious jeopardy. If you found this breakdown insightful, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss the latest updates on this unfolding trade battle. The United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement, signed in 2020, was designed to modernize North American trade and reduce the impact of tariffs on industries like automotive manufacturing. One of its key provisions requires 75% of auto parts to be sourced from North America to qualify for tariff-free trade, increasing production costs for automakers. Additionally, stricter labor and manufacturing regulations have sparked concerns, especially as US-Mexico trade tensions continue to escalate. Analysts warn that if Mexico enforces tighter labor policies, automakers relying on low-cost Mexican labor could face higher operational expenses and supply chain disruptions. To mitigate these challenges, US automakers are rethinking supply chains and seeking alternative sources for materials. Some are shifting toward domestic steel production, while others are sourcing from Canada and South Korea to counter rising costs. However, these adjustments come with higher expenses and longer supply routes, affecting production timelines. Experts caution that supplier changes could delay vehicle manufacturing and further increase car prices for consumers. As the industry adapts, the effectiveness of USMCA remains uncertain. While it aims to strengthen regional trade, compliance challenges and costlier regulations may push automakers to explore new global supply strategies. Whether these shifts will sustain North America's competitiveness or lead to further market disruptions will depend on policy stability and industry resilience in an evolving trade environment. With low-cost labor, strategic location, and a strong industrial base, Mexico has solidified its role as a global auto production hub. Major automakers like Volkswagen, Toyota, and BMW continue expanding their operations, reinforcing Mexico's position as a key supplier to North America. The country produces over 3 million vehicles annually, with the United States as its largest export market. As trade tensions rise, US automakers are being pushed to boost investments in Mexican facilities to remain competitive. However, soaring production costs, ongoing supply chain disruptions, and the looming threat of job losses are creating major challenges. The automotive sector, heavily reliant on Mexican imports, is struggling to maintain profitability as tariffs continue to drive up expenses. If trade policies remain uncertain, manufacturers may be forced to cut jobs, reduce output, or shift operations elsewhere. In the end, this trade war isn't just about numbers, it's about the future of an entire industry. Jobs are on the line, prices are rising, and the balance of power is shifting fast. If this crisis keeps escalating, the US auto industry could be facing a storm it may not recover from. But what happens next? Will policymakers step in before it's too late? Or are we watching a historic collapse unfold in real time? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and if you want the latest updates on this high-stakes battle, subscribe now and turn on notifications. This story is far from over, and you won't want to miss what's coming next.